So sorry for the late start. I had some technical difficulties, and I'm just going to sort of wing it without my notes, or at least without easily reading my notes. So as you can see, I'm from British Columbia, and in January of 2013, I started my first Connectivist MOOC called xMOOC, Educational Technology and Media MOOC. And through that experience, I got really interested in the whole idea of Connectivist MOOCs, what they can do, how they work, why I think they're great. And being a researcher, I'm a professor in philosophy at the University of British Columbia, immediately came to mind to me, well, I thought this was a fantastic experience, but how can I show that it is a fantastic thing to do, that Connectivist MOOCs are useful, that they are effective in doing certain things, right? So I wanted to look into researching them. But the more I looked into it, the more I found difficulties. The more I found, well, I looked at these kinds of articles and they're doing this, but I'm not sure that's the best way. And then I looked at these kinds of articles and I'm not sure that's the best way. So today I'm not going to give you the answer. Here it is. Here's how we should research Connectivist MOOCs. I'm going to say, here's what I think are some problems with the ways that they've been looked at. Not that they're all bad, but they're not complete. And so now where do we go? And I'm going to leave you with that question. We got time to actually talk about that question. And if you want, I made a little hashtag for this. That was a suggestion by somebody in case I wanted to see what people were saying about this particular session. So it's diff C MOOC. All right, well, most of you probably already know what Connectivist MOOCs are, but just in case, I thought there might be some people who weren't entirely sure. And I'm just going to give you a few of the basics of what a Connectivist MOOC is like. So it's a network. It's focused on making connections between people and between people and information, rather than providing knowledge given out from a central source. It is distributed, meaning it takes place in many different places amongst or around the web. And as Stephen Downes says in one of his blog posts or presentations actually, a MOOC is a web, not a website. And so I made this little diagram of a Connectivist MOOC that I'm helping to organize right now called the Open Online Experience, which is an educational technology MOOC for teachers, K through higher ed. And just to give you a sense of where it is located around the web, we have a weekly email, we have live webinars, we have a weekly Twitter chat, but then there's also Google Plus posts, blog posts, tweets, and you might, go from this one to that one to that one to that one, sort of a path that you might traverse each week. Connectivist MOOCs also emphasize autonomy, and this is going to be big in what I have to say later. So participants choose when to participate, how to participate. They create their own goals for the course, rather than there being a set of learning goals that everyone follows. And they choose their own paths through the course, and that's why I like this still image from a video by Dave Cormier and Neil Gillis, which is a similar kind of diagram to the one I made, but this one has a nice little green path. So someone might go to that blog post, and that document, and this discussion board, and that bookmark, and that tweet, and then have an idea. Because I took this path, this is the idea I have. Someone else takes a different path, gets different ideas. And then, of course, Connectivist MOOCs are open online courses, so they are open. And they are open in terms of not just free access to anyone, and of course always those people available who have an available and reliable internet connection, but also the curriculum is open to participants contributing to it and changing it, as we'll see. So if you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of this kind of thing, what might you do? Do you want to say, these sorts of MOOCs are effective for X. If you want to do Y, you might want to do a Connectivist MOOC. And the whole idea of evaluating effectiveness, to my mind, brings out, well, you could ask, do they achieve goals? That makes sense. If you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of something, has it achieved its goal? But then, of course, you have to ask which goals, because there are numerous sorts of goals involved in Connectivist MOOCs. And I'm not even listing all of them, because some of the goals that might be considered are goals of the institution, if an institution is offering this sort of thing. And I decided just for the purposes of what I'm particularly interested in, not to look at that. And besides, a number of Connectivist MOOCs are not offered by institutions. So a couple of the ones that I've taken, the one that I'm involved in organizing, OOE13, is just a group of volunteers who loved xMOOC and wanted to give another xMOOC type experience to others. And there's like 25 of us just putting it together. So there's no institution directly involved. So these are the things that I'm going to look at in the rest of the presentation. You could look at the goals of the designers of the course. Does the cMOOC meet those? Of the participants. I wasn't really sure how to say the next bullet point. The goal of connectivism, maybe, that you should be making connections between people and information. You can see if that's happening. And then Stephen Downs, a few months ago, made a blog post on evaluating the quality of MOOCs, and Connectivist MOOCs in particular. And this is the sort of argument that he gives, and I'll go through that pretty quickly. And then if there's time, there's one other type of research project that I looked at that we can discuss briefly, but we may run out of time. So first, looking at the goals of Connectivist MOOC designers, and these are going to vary depending on which Connectivist MOOC you're talking about. So in the Educational Technology and Media MOOC, xMOOC, one of the goals, I mean there were many goals of the designers, but one of them clearly was to help us understand educational technology, how you might use it, different sorts of tools, right? So you could just look through the list of topics and you could see, well, these are the sorts of things they are hoping that we get out of the course. But not only that, there are certainly other goals. The Connectivist and Connectivism and Connective Knowledge courses, CCK 08, 09, 11, 10, I don't remember how many of them there were, have been. Those were quite explicitly designed to help people understand connectivism and to talk about connectivism and to even build out the theory of connectivism more. So you can look at those kinds of goals if you wanted to see, has the course been effective? Is it doing what you designed it to do? Well, of course, then the issue is you've got participant autonomy. And that means that people are going to be doing what, when, and how they choose. And they may or may not get out of the course what you were hoping for them to get out of the course, because they are choosing what to focus on, what to read, what to write. But does that mean the course has not succeeded because they're getting something else out of it? I'm not sure. What happens in the course depends on what the participants do. So the curriculum, as I mentioned before, is designed in large part by the participants and what they actually write about, what they actually say in their blogs, what kinds of conversations go on in the comments, on the discussion boards, what they share on Google Plus or Twitter in the tweet chats. So really the content of the course is not up to the designers in a very grand sense, which I think is a good thing. And so, as a result, the course may be successful or fail in ways that the designers never imagined. So you can have this idea in your head of what you think the course is going to be like and what you want people to get out of it, but as it goes along, many, many different kinds of things are going to happen, and people are going to learn many, many different sorts of things because they choose their own paths and because different things are written about than you would have guessed in blogs and on discussion boards. Okay, so here's another option, and I didn't actually find any research articles that looked at the goals of designers, probably because that's not really the best way to do it. It was just an idea that came to my head, well, I could do that, and then I'm not sure that's a good idea. This image is not showing up very well. It's an analysis of a tweet chat by Hummingbird, and there's a link here, which tells you how many people are tweeting at each other and how many replies are going back and forth. So it's more like a picture of the connections between people. So Lisa Lane in 2013 published an article where she talks about a connectivist-style open online course teaching teachers how to teach online. And one of the things that she did in this article is to say, well, we asked participants at the beginning of the course, what goals do you have for that course? And then we surveyed them in the middle and at the end to see if those goals had been fulfilled or if those goals had changed. So that's one thing you might do. If you don't want to look at the designer's goals, you might want to look at the participants' goals for the course and ask them, have they fulfilled those? And I mean, I've just come up with a number of concerns. I'll list them out all quickly here. Participants may have goals that don't fit the course. You may start the course with a certain goal, but you don't really know what that course is like. Most people, when they're starting a Connectivist MOOC, for example, don't know what a Connectivist MOOC is and how it works. So they might say at the end of the course their goals were not fulfilled, but does that mean the course failed? Participants may not have any goals. I say this because that was me. When I took xMOOC, I had no idea what I was getting into. I looked at the list of topics and I said, I don't know what that is, I don't know what that is, and I don't know what that is, but I'm going to give it a chance. Some people that I respect are taking it, looks interesting, let me try. So if they had asked me what my goals were at the beginning of the course, I would have said none, and that's kind of on purpose because I just want to see what happens. The course may have other benefits not captured in participants' goals. And if that's the case, if you focus too much on their goals only and ask them, did you reach those goals that you said at the beginning of the course, they might not even think about other things that were valuable to them because their mind is focused on just those goals. And then lastly, I think especially in a Connectivist MOOC, benefits, the things that you can get out of it can take a long time to realize. And this has been my experience. So the things that I got most out of xMOOC were connections to other people. And those connections didn't really, besides the fact that I met people I really am interested in and it's great and I made friends, but there are other benefits too that didn't really start to materialize until months later, like collaborating with people on research projects, collaborating with people on creating another Connectivist MOOC. And some of these collaborations are going to continue for years. Right? And you're not going to get that by just asking people about their goals at the end of the course. So I was thinking, well, what one might do. If you wanted to look at the goals of participants, you could ask them at the end of the course what they got out of it, with or without reference to some original goals. So you could do that kind of survey thing at the end. Was it beneficial for you? If so, how? And then return to them 6 months or later to ask again. Right? Now, the problem with doing that sort of thing is you maybe lose participants because they're already, you get low participation rates in surveys right as the course is ending, but then 6 months later you're going to get like 10 people, so there's that problem. But those are a couple of things that we might do. And then there's also a nice research article by Cop20 and Mac, who didn't necessarily look at what are participants' goals and whether they were reached, but instead looked at things that Connectivist MOOCs ought to have, qualities that they ought to have, in order that people are able to be self-directed and autonomous and succeeding in achieving their goals. So you can look at those sorts of things, and that's a very interesting article for that. Okay, third thing. You could look at, are connections being made between people and information? And here are just some quotes about Connectivism from Downs and Siemens, that knowledge is distributed across a network of connections. It's defined as a particular pattern of relationships. Learning is learning how to traverse those connections or create those kinds of networks. I don't have time to go into Connectivism in any really great detail. But the idea is, I thought, well, I could look into Connectivist MOOCs and see if people are connecting. Are they connecting to each other? Are they making connections between their own ideas and ideas given by the designers or the participants in the course? And then I discovered that a number of people are looking at this without, I think, calling it that, because they're looking at participation rates. Quite a few of the research articles on cMOOCs look at participation rates. And by participation rates, I mean, how many blog posts is someone writing? How often are they commenting on other people's blog posts? How many tweets do they do? How involved are they in tweet chats? Do they attend live webinars? Do they post on discussion boards? All that kind of thing. And I'm thinking of that as possibly a proxy for, depending on how you evaluate the data, a proxy for connecting to information and connecting to other people. And there are plenty of, for example, Twitter tools out there that can show you it visually and otherwise, how much people are connecting to each other on Twitter, right? So who's responding to whom, how many tweets, who's done the most tweets, So you can actually make these visualizations on Twitter. You could probably do a similar thing with blog posts. Who's commenting on whose blog posts? And does that person comment back? Do you see a kind of conversation going on? So is there a connection there? So there are probably ways that you could use learning analytics to look at these sorts of connections. And there are a number of research articles that have done so. And I'm amazed, in the last few months, there's been 5 or 6 research articles coming out on cMOOCs. So I really got lucky right before this presentation. So one of them, by Milligan, Littlejohn, and Margarian, did surveys of participants to ask about their participation rates. So you can ask, how many blog posts did you do, how much did you comment, etc. There's one recently also that looked at log data from peer-to-peer university from their particular platform. So there, the whole course is really centralized on a platform which has a discussion board. Sometimes it'll also take people out to their individual blog posts. But what this one did is just looked at how many times people looked at pages, how many posts they did on the discussion board, how long they stayed on pages. If you had a central site, you could do that sort of thing. That doesn't work quite so well for most cMOOCs. Many of the articles that I found are mixed methods. So they will look at Twitter data, they will look at data from a Moodle site. If there's a central site for the cMOOC on Moodle, they will look to see how many people are posting on the discussion board, how many times they visit a certain page. I haven't seen anybody do anything automated with blogs. I mean, I've thought about this. Like, could you somehow automatically count the number of blog posts per month? And I think you can, but then what do you do with comments? Because I really want to look at how many comments you're giving and getting, and are those the same people, and are you having a conversation? You might do that. I haven't seen it. But the mixed methods are all some combination of learning analytics, so looking at that data, and surveys and interviews and focus groups. So here, these are articles looking at, well, are people participating in the sort of deep way that you might think a cMOOC should invite? And if they're not, how can we improve that? What is it that's keeping people from being able to participate? So things like confidence levels, the tools are new, the tools are too scattered, they got lost. So these articles are looking at that kind of thing. But the problem, again, is autonomy. So do you want to say that if people are not really connected in a deep way, if they're not really making connections to other people, if they're sort of out here in this is a Twitter chat, a tweet analysis, if they're kind of just standing off to the sidelines and being a bit like lurkers, do you want to say that the course is not succeeding, right? Do we just evaluate a cMOOC on the basis of how many people are really participating? Because there's autonomy. People should be able to lurk if they want to. They should be able to participate as much or as little as they want to. So as I say here, there's a tension. You need at least some active participation, but participants must also have autonomy. And some of the quotes from some of the papers that I had on my notes but couldn't print out because the Business Center printer isn't working, were saying things like, for a cMOOC to succeed, you really need to have at least a certain amount of active participation. And that's true, and yet we want to tell people participate as much or as little as you want to. And this also brings up the question for me, are lurkers valued? Because yes, they should be, participate as much as you want to, but at the same time, if not enough people are really participating, you're not going to have very much of a cMOOC, because most of the cMOOC is all about what people are doing in it. And there was a quote from one of the articles that said, lurkers are important because they may become active participants. That's the path towards becoming active participants. And that's fine, but it also indicates that there's really not an emphasis on autonomy as much as you might want to think, because really what we're saying is, fine, be a lurker, but move towards active participation. I just think this is a tension, and I'm not quite sure how to deal with it. So I don't want to just look at participation rates when I'm evaluating a cMOOC, because there are plenty of people who are doing learning, but are not participating widely. Okay, this is the last one we'll get to. Stephen Downes in May wrote something on the FCAL blog about evaluating the quality of MOOCs. And he said, let's look at what sorts of entities cMOOCs are and what sorts of purposes they ought to serve. Kind of like, he compared them to a hammer. So a hammer is a particular kind of entity with a particular sort of purpose, and people may use it for all kinds of things. But what doesn't matter is how people use it. What matters is its design, and is it designed to fulfill the right purpose. So let's look at that for MOOCs as well, for cMOOCs. Let's see what kind of entities they are, what purposes they serve, and whether they're well designed for those purposes. So here's a quote from his blog post. And what he focuses on is what a successful cMOOC ought to produce as output, without reference to existing, frankly, very variable usage. And I'm going to zip quickly through this. So what should it produce as output? Emergent knowledge. Knowledge that was not present in any of the individual communications, but is produced as a result of the totality of the communications. So ideally, in a cMOOC, what should result is some kind of knowledge that is produced through all the interactions between people, right? And wasn't just from one person or a few people. And there's certain sorts of networks that tend to produce this kind of knowledge. They have autonomy, which I've already described, diversity of participants, so people with different views, different backgrounds, openness, in the ways I've already described, and interactivity and connectiveness such that you can get knowledge emerging from that interactivity, not just one person expressing their view and everybody else following it, but somehow connecting in a way that you can produce something together. And then he says how we should evaluate cMOOCs according to these 4 criteria. Don't measure each aspect of a cMOOC against these as if a checklist. Think of a cMOOC as a language, and a particular MOOC as an expression in that language. And then you would ask a person who's fluent in cMOOCs, who knows what cMOOCs are like, who knows what the design is and the purpose is, then to recognize the quality just by looking at it. Right? And to me, and this is the last thing I'll say, questions and concerns about this approach: how can we determine if emergent knowledge has been produced? Where would we look? Who would we ask? Well, we would ask the expert in this MOOCs. And then it has a seemingly exclusive focus on the design and purpose of cMOOCs rather than considering the participant's experience. So what I've got here is, if you look at the participant's experience, there are some problems. If you look at the designer's experience, there are some problems. If you look at just what cMOOCs are, you're not talking about the participants. Somehow I want to put all this together, and I don't have time to get to that. And we don't have time for you to talk to me about your suggestions. Dang.
I need to talk with you.
Okay.
Because I completed an ethnographic study of a MOOC. Actually, I think it's the same MOOC that Junan worked on.
Oh, cool.
A mechanical MOOC,
Yeah.
which is something in between a cMOOC and xMOOC.
Oh.
And I saw it from the point of view of designers.
Okay.
You couldn't find it because it would be published in general.
That's why. So slides and bibliography are here. And yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody after the session.
Thank you.